Hi everyone, it's Don from the MS Guide. The date is the 23rd of December and I just want to do a little 2022 in review. I want to recap how this channel got going. In March 2021, I had a chat, March 21, I had a chat with somebody that I know. He's an MS doctor called Dr. Aaron Boster in the States, and he was very keen. He said, Dom, start a channel. Men are underrepresented in MS. And that's true, certainly in the numbers. It's about 2/3 of women to 1/3 of men. But that aside, I owe this to Aaron Boster because I've actually really come to love this. And it's made better by all your guys' support, your suggestions, your comments, your subscriptions, albeit not enough of them. Roughly half the people who watch aren't subscribed, and if you're one of them and you're watching this and you're still watching the video, I hope you feel guilty and that you subscribe, because I really appreciate your support just by clicking the subscribe button. I know everybody with YouTube says this, but the reason why is there's an algorithm. We're slaves to the algorithm, and therefore it's doing what makes it happy, so it shows my videos, the MS Guides videos, to other people, and part of that is subscribing and watching. So I really appreciate it when you do that. The other thing is support. I don't get paid by anybody to do this. I do all this off my own back, and it's a lot of work, and I want to raise my profile and get paid, but there is a Patreon link at the bottom in the description, and if you can see your way to supporting me, I'd be super grateful. And if I get people supporting me on Patreon, I can make it content just for them as well, and we can make a little community hopefully. But that's pie in the sky right now, but any support is really grateful. My camera is my iPhone on a stand, and my microphone is just some little 40 quid mic, which is just slightly better than my PC. But anyhow, on with that. 2022 was a really busy year. You guys got to see me talk at times about my own move from Ocrevus to Lemtrada, and some of the reasons why are in an article I wrote for the Bart's blog for Professor Gavin Giovannoni, and I will link to that in the bottom as well if you really want to see why. I've had MS for 29 years, and Lemtrada is my 5th DMT. So I started on Rebif, went to Copaxone, went to Tecfidera. I was on the trials for Tecfidera. Then I went to Ocrevus, and now I'm on Lemtrada. The worst thing about Lemtrada for me was the steroids. They just keep you awake from day 3. It was impossible. I tried some sleeping pills, but my doctor pulled a face at me the next day because I took 3 one night to try and get to sleep, and they still weren't working, and she sort of kept a straight face and went, I wouldn't do that tomorrow night. And I went, okay, I'll just put up with it. But the thing about Lemtrada, out of the 5 DMTs I've taken, it's the least I've felt for any drug ever. I'm not kidding. It's just, there is nothing. People want to know if you've got side effects this or side effects that, and in my case, nothing. And I was just speaking to a friend. I can't tell you the whole sort of, I'm no longer tied to the system. When I have my second Lemtrada, sure, I have blood tests to do after that, but I no longer have the idea of yet more drugs hanging over my head. Done and dusted. And that brings me on to IRTs, immunoreconstitutive therapies. With Professor Klaus Schmeier from Bart's, we spoke about immunoreconstitution therapies, which are sort of one above, Ocrevus and Kesimpta and things like that, because the idea is you take them and they hopefully hit your system enough that it gets a chance to rebuild. The real one, shall we say, in the IRT space is stem cells. And stem cells are something which people with MS are super keen to get. On the channel, one of the big achievements for this year was to follow Rachel through her stem cells, from before having them, why she had them or why she chose to have them, the whole procedure. She was incredibly brave. She sent videos from her hospital bed when frankly she wasn't feeling too shiny, lost all her hair, etc. And I'd just like to tell you, I was speaking to her yesterday. Number one, I've never seen somebody who looks like they've got a smile that they can't wipe off their face. And curly hair, which is new for her. So the hair is growing back, and Rachel feels better than she's felt for 5 years. So that's partly why she's smiling. Stem cells has different effects for different people. But in Rachel's case, and she'll be back on the channel soon, maybe with Rebecca Scott interviewing her, it has been a spectacular success. And even if it's bought her, as she said, another 5 years of feeling pretty decent, or 10 years, or maybe more, who knows, it's, from her point of view, well worth it. Here's some things I'm going to rattle off that I've covered this year. So fermented foods, gut health, the whole gut-brain thing, and eating fermented foods. I'm a bit of a nerd. I make my own bread. I have done for quite a while now. Sourdough from a starter called Eddie. And Eddie was given to me actually this year. A new starter. I threw out the old one, Paul. And Eddie was given to me by an MS buddy called Marieke, who lives in the Netherlands. And I met her for the first time when I went over for Ectrums, which was pretty cool. But general, that takes us on to diet and exercise. We look at everything through the MS lens, but broadly advice for life, I think, eat a good diet, exercise well. You don't have to be an Olympic athlete, but exercise is good for our bodies. This sort of fleshy shell that we just conduct life in, it responds better to being worked. It's relatively recently, last sort of 50, 100 years, where we've acquired the kind of lifestyle which makes it easy, or much easier, not to lift a finger, certainly in certain societies, and get quite an unhealthy weight and quite an unhealthy lack of activity. But yeah, the thing is with MS, it's like with bells on, this matters. You don't just get a pill to fix something and then do nothing yourself. You can do things for MS. Exercise is really good for your MS, because MS is a bugger. It takes away your ability to move as smoothly. And after 29 years, I do not move around with panther-like grace, I have to say. And I fight it, though. I really fight it. Clinical trials. A couple things about clinical trials that I would like to reiterate. Clinical trials are like quasi-private healthcare, because you end up with, if you choose to take part in a clinical trial, you see a heck of a lot of a neurologist compared to the annual visit. The other thing is, with MS, it's on many conditions, but in our case MS, there's a lot of evidence to show you do better with your disease if you have more regular contact with doctors. The other thing with trials is they've got more time, because it's a research component and it's generally being funded by somebody else. There's not that thing in the doctor's head, but they're sort of at least looking at their mental watch going 20 minutes, I've got to get this person out in 20 minutes because I've got a waiting room full of people. So clinical trials buy you time. When you're on a phase 3 trial, you're not taking something wacky. I was on the phase 3 trial for Tecfidera. So clinical trials. I'm on Sysmus, which is testing the first adjunct therapy. So that means you've got your DMT plus another drug, which if you think about it in MS, you don't have 2 drugs to treat your MS at this stage, which is pretty common in other conditions. You might have 2 drugs, let's say cancer. I don't know much about it, but you can often have 2, even 3, maybe 4, I don't know, drugs to attack the disease. If you think about the other drugs like, baclofen, for example, or Vampira, if you're in the States, they're to treat symptoms of the disease. They're not to treat the disease. So it's super important that someone's looking at another drug to treat the MS disease. And I'm not that level of science knowledge. So the way I liken it with the drug that they're doing in Sysmus, there's B cells where they shouldn't be in your brain, and this drug sort of goes around like the school teacher, mops them all up and says, right, everybody, other side of the blood-brain barrier, come with me, and sort of marches them out. Any scientist or doctor watching this is going to feel that's a huge, shocking oversimplification, but that's pretty much what it is. And I checked this with the trial doctor. She laughed and said, I suppose so. So that's it. Medical cannabis. And Sativex in the UK. Sativex is one of those drugs which it's approved, but I don't know why it's so blinking difficult for some people to get. But if you watch the video with Dr. Leon Barron, a GP who specializes in medical cannabis, he'll tell you how to go about asking for Sativex, because half of it is understanding how to ask, knowing the system, that kind of thing. We covered swallowing issues with Caroline Conway, who's a physical therapist in the United States that Dr. Buster put me in touch with. Dysphagia, it's called. So things for MS. We talked about staying positive with MS, because that's bloody hard sometimes. You really feel a bit, frankly, hacked off with the whole God and his universe thing. And Rebecca Scott, she took us through how she does it. Because I've been extremely fortunate. I'm not as affected as some people are, and Scotty is quite affected by it. You know, she's had it for a while now. We did 5 tips for the newly diagnosed. That was me and Dr. Boster. Me saying from a patient's point of view, and Dr. Boster saying from a doctor's point of view. You know, the 5 things he'd like to see you do, and he's done several 5 for 5 videos. I'm just looking through my list here. It's oh yeah, I did one of debunking a herbal cure for MS, you know, and I really got into it. There's not buying it, but debunking it. The website's registered in the United Arab Emirates. It's owned by a Palestinian man. It's these herbal cures, and they don't mess around with their claims. It will cure MS, which, you know, I don't know why nobody's picked up on this, because curing MS would be a pretty cool thing. And they charge a heck of a lot of money for it. And then the more I dug, and the thing that made me giggle was the same product is marketed by the same company with a different website for anal fissures. Anal fissures and MS. Who knew that they were so related? But anyway, I was just giving some tips on how to spot these scams and stuff. And the basic rule, if it sounds too good to be true, probably is. I got taken sailing by Oceans of Hope Challenge, and they specifically focus on MS. Nothing else. It's letting people with MS have a space to sail a boat, to realize what they can do, work as a team, get out of the house. They're equipped for people in all the way up to people who are very disabled, EDSS 6.57 in wheelchairs. My friend Mark Webb went on a tall ships sailing trip. There's a picture of him being winched up the mast or something. I mean, they really are good for this. And if you're in England, and you can get to a couple of the different coastal ports where they run it from, and they do some inland events as well, look up Oceans of Hope. There's a video on that. There's MS centres, which are often not used much by the younger people with MS because of the sort of perceived vibe that it's for older people. They're not. They've got a ton of services there that you can access really cheaply that are really good. I see the osteopath at mine. I'm no longer young, I'll grant you that, but it's £10. If I saw the same osteopath privately, it'd be 50. I interviewed he'll laugh, a minor American celebrity, a guy called Tyler Campbell, an ex-college football player, and football of the American football kind. College football in the States is a big thing, and his dad played in the NFL and was in the NFL Hall of Fame. But Tyler Campbell lives in Texas. He was diagnosed with MS in his first year of college football on a scholarship. Pretty devastating news. And he talks to us about how he got through it. So there's Tyler. I spoke with Brandon Price in the States, why men are bad at dealing with MS emotions. He was driving convoys in Iraq and wondering, you know, as a soldier, wondering why he was having vision problems and how men are more likely to push through and not be wimpy and take another ibuprofen, and been there. And he was telling us about that and how he's changed and accepted his MS and giving his tips. We spoke about remyelination therapies that are in trial. That was a really popular video. Recently spoke to Jamie Jeffries about mental health, and that's a first for me. It's a 4-part series on mental health, and we've done the very first one just talking about what talking therapies are and where they fit in the whole thing to make it easier to understand. Spoke to a specialist optometrist called David Bennett, who is actually a friend of mine and does my glasses, and spoke about OCT, which is, let me get this right, optical coherence tomography. And it's this super groovy way of looking at the back of the eye, the nerve, etc., to start to essentially add this in the toolkit of things to monitor your MS, and more MS centers are getting OCT machines. And David was just explaining it. I'm not going to give you a lesson on it now because you need to watch the video, I'm afraid. We spoke to Dr. Mitzi Joy Williams, a very prominent MS physician in the States. She's black. She specializes in researching why MS seems to affect black and Hispanic people more. And that is something which is unexplained, and people don't know if it's socioeconomic, genetic. Dr. Ben Adams in London is doing a study about genetics, the Adams study. Looking at that, it's one of these things that people don't know the answer, but they're looking into it hard. Spoke to another HSCT patient. She's about 6 months post, 1 year post HSCT. Natalie, she had it in London, and what she was like before, what the process was, it's quite interesting. She's got a different angle and take on the whole thing on some parts of it to Rachel, but it's just different people, different views on it, why they went for HSCT, how they got it, all that kind of stuff. I went to ECTRIMS, which is the world's biggest medical conference to do with MS. I was taken there by my friends at Lived Health. I did a lot of reporting for them. I'll link to Lived Health in the video description as well. And it was hard work, and it was just feeding from the fire hose, because it was just everything about MS with about 8,000 MS physicians from around the world. And it was pretty cool. It was 3 days, I think. Yeah, 3 days, not 5. And then I went to that. But just looking back, I made this big list that I'm reading from behind the camera. The whole thing has just been a bit of a whirlwind of a year. If I was going to sum it up and say the one thing that I took away from the year and that I'd want somebody else to take away from the year is MS is serious stuff. I think it's not taken seriously enough because it doesn't immediately kill people. If I say cancer to you, many people's mind turns to death, and then that seems to sort of change their whole game about how it's spoken about and how it's dealt with and the time frames involved. I mean, if I go to my doctor, I think I wrote an article about this as well, and said, I've got a lump in a place I shouldn't have, it's sort of all hands to the pump, and you hear in the press everyone talks about cancer care and this time and that time that it takes to do this, and nobody ever talks about it with MS. But MS is a chronic disabling condition that doesn't go away. It doesn't get better. It may not be visible on MRI this second for changes, but it is happening inside us. And I think the message is, it just means a clear MRI to me, to you, to anybody, that the technology that we've got right now and the way we're looking at things can't see any change. It doesn't mean there is no change. It's smoldering MS. It's there. It's like the campfire that you haven't properly put out. Busy year. If you've stayed to the end of this video, awesome. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments. I respond to them. Anybody, if you go look at comments on any video, they all get responded to. If I don't respond to a comment, then I consider I've failed in some way, because I think if you watch the videos and you've got questions, you would like to have answers. Please subscribe. Please support me on the Patreon link, and please stay well. Have a great 2023, and I hope this year's been good, and Christmas and everything is good for everybody. Holiday, however you call it, whatever you celebrate. So, all right, folks, that's all from me this year. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your help. Bye-bye.